you are seeing these families at their worst. This is their hopes and dreams laying there in that crib, and that they never wanted to be here. Nobody ever wants to visit us in the NICU. And so when you take that perspective and give families grace.
Welcome to NICU Heroes, a podcast produced exclusively for NICU professionals, with me, Kathryn Whitaker, as your host. I'm the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit dedicated to providing free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a baby's NICU stay. As a NICU professional, you've been well trained to care for the tiniest and the sickest babies every day. While a NICU parent's scars are not as visible, those parents are often as fragile as their babies, requiring patience, guidance, and encouragement to ensure that they are mentally, emotionally, and physically prepared to endure the pressure of a NICU stay. NICU Heroes is dedicated to helping NICU professionals like you better understand, support, and nurture the entire NICU family. Howdy, everybody. Welcome back to NICU Heroes. This is one of my favorite months of the year. September is always focused on National NICU Nurses Day, and for good reason. Y'all are amazing. So I called one of the people that is most precious to our family. She's also incredibly accomplished. She was one of our bedside nurses when we were in the neonatal intensive care unit, and now she's got a big fancy job doing amazing things for nurses. And I knew that she could speak both to the bedside, but also quality and education and what's happening for NICU professionals around the country. And she is an exceptional guest. I also know that your job is not easy. I know that you get a lot of love, particularly from your patients and your families, but I also know that what you do on a daily basis takes a toll. And so I felt like it was important for us to address, how do you handle the hard days? How do you maintain your passion, not only for nursing, but for all those NICU babies and all the things that come along with that? Because I know it's more than just babies. There are lots of other things that your job entails. And so I knew that I needed to have someone who could speak into all of that. And I know that you're going to love today's guest. My guest today is Dr. Lisa Davenport. She's a former NICU parent, and she's also the director of nursing for Texas Children's NICU in Houston, Texas. Lisa's experience as a NICU bedside nurse for 9 years fueled her passion for becoming a quality-driven and people-centric nursing leader. You will absolutely hear that come out in our interview. Additionally, Lisa serves as a faculty member for the Texas Tech Health Science Center School of Nursing. And so with that, let's talk about how amazing NICU nurses are and how we can serve you better. Well, it's always a joy when I get to look across the screen, at least for those people that are watching on YouTube, and see a familiar face. Lisa Davenport, thanks for being here.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here. It's quite an honor.
Well, we spent a lot of time with you in the NICU, and now it's more fun. It's kind of like when you see your kids' teachers in the classroom, and then you're like, hey, now we get to see you at the grocery store. So now I get to see you here, and it's really great. But you have so much wisdom as we speak about nurses, and particularly NICU nurses. I knew that there was no one better served to talk about all the things that they do and how they can be even better at their jobs. So that's you today. So why don't we start with, how did you find yourself in medicine, and then why specifically NICU nursing? I think it's always helpful for people to hear how you got to where you are.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. My story is actually pretty unique in that I have always known that NICU is where I wanted to be. Since I was 3 years old, we went to the hospital to visit a family friend that had had a baby. And, back then NICUs had windows in them and you could actually peek in and see the babies a long time ago. And so I told my mom and dad, I said, I want to take care of the tiny babies. And they said, oh, like a pediatrician, you're a pediatrician. And I said, no, just the babies. And so that's when I learned the word neonatologist when I was 3 years old.
Wow.
And so I was on track to go to medical school and ended up with a pre-med biomedical science degree from A&M. But in the course of that, I started working at the hospital and really understanding the differences. I think growing up, everybody just says, oh, go be a doctor, and that's what you should do. And really, in started working at the hospital, you understand that there's such unique, wonderful things about each profession, about the medical profession or the nursing profession. And really just aligning with what I wanted out of a career, it was nursing. Hands down, I realized that nursing is what it was. And so there really was no doubt that NICU is where I wanted to be. And so I took an alternate path and did a second degree nursing program after my undergraduate. But I will say I also wear another hat as a nursing professor. And so I've taught many nursing students through the years, and not many nursing students come in knowing exactly where they want to work. And many of them discover that as they go through the program. So I will say I probably am a little bit of an anomaly in that way, that I knew immediately exactly where I wanted to be.
And also the fact that you knew that at age 3. Like, I don't even know if I have memories from age 3, so that may be the earliest, like, vocation story that I've ever heard of, like, this is what I wanna do at this age, like, that's really impressive. But I know I mentioned at the very beginning that you are our NICU nurse, but I know that you have a
Yeah.
very different role now, so why don't you share with people, I know you started out in NICU nursing, tell us a little bit about how you went from NICU nursing and then what you do right now at Texas Children's.
Sure, absolutely. So I really, I went to nursing school to be a bedside NICU nurse. I think that whenever you think of nursing, you think of being a bedside nurse in a hospital, and that was my plan. I had really planned to be at the bedside for my entire career. I loved being at the bedside. I loved bonding
You were
with
good at it.
families. Oh, thank you. Bonding with families like you. I did night shift for 9 years. I loved night shift. I loved that special time you got to spend with families at night. And so that was my plan. I was very happy. I was teaching on the side and doing bedside nursing. And my husband's career made us make a move to another city. And upon coming to another city and interviewing for a staff nurse position, they offered me a staff nurse position, and they said, "But you have your master's. Are you sure? Is there some? We have this other position you might be interested in." And it was a position called a clinical specialist, which was a quality position, and really making sure the unit was up to date on evidence-based practice and any kind of new quality metrics or policies and procedures. And so I found myself in that role very quickly after moving, and the rest is really just history. It's my career has been absolutely marked by people seeing things in me that I didn't see in myself.
Mm.
And so I would just encourage any nurses that are out there that, don't ever close off any doors and pigeonhole yourself. Whenever other people are telling you that they believe in you and they see something in you, listen. And so I took several leaps of faith over the last really 9 years, and moved from a couple of quality positions, ended up in a house-wide nursing quality position, meaning that I was in over nursing quality for the entire system, and learned a lot about the other areas. I've always been in NICU, and so it really was a great perspective at a pediatric hospital to be able to understand how the quality metrics for the other areas really work together, and how NICU is different, but
Yes, you are.
it's not so different, and there's a
Yeah.
time and a place for us to be different. And so then several years ago, I had somebody that believed in me enough that I could do operations. And so I ended up moving into a role where I was in charge of a smaller hospital, NICU, and labor and delivery and mother baby unit. And that was really just such an incredible opportunity. Being a smaller hospital, I got to not only do quality, which I love and is my heart, but I also got to have that people aspect and had a wonderful team. And so then since then, I've moved on and come back to the Children's Hospital. And so now I am the director over NICU 4 and clinical practice for one of we think we're the largest NICU in the country, but we'll see. And it's such a joy. We have almost 700 staff in our NICU,
Wow.
and I have an incredible leadership team that I get to lead every day, and we get to do amazing work. So, been in this position for almost 3 years, and I'm still overall quality for the newborn center, and which is great. I still get to do quality, and then also get to do the people aspect too.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning. I know you said to NICU professionals that might be listening, like, don't pigeonhole yourself. I also think you got to give yourself a little bit of credit, Lisa, in the fact that you put yourself around people who you trusted and that you respected their opinions. So when they did say, "Hey, we see this in you," that they were leading you down a really great path. So I think that's also a good reminder. Surround yourself with people that are passionate about what they do and they start to see things in you, like you said, that sometimes you can't see in yourself. I love that. That's so great.
Absolutely.
All right. So I know you talked a little bit about the difference while they're the same, but also a little bit different. So, when we're speaking about NICU nursing specifically and neonatologists, maybe give people, and I know if you're a NICU professional, you know the difference between the NICU nurse and the neonatologist, but what makes them work so well together, particularly when you're thinking about from a nursing aspect, specifically in the NICU as opposed to like PDICU or just on the general floor?
I think, truthfully, the thing that makes NICU so unique is our patient population, and the fact that many of our babies stay for a very extended stay, and that's something that really bonds you together from a medical and a nursing perspective, and for the families. We get very attached to our patients. Some of them staying up to a year in our unit. And no other area of the hospital really has that. I would say that the next closest maybe would be like hematology oncology. Many of those
Right.
patients have very extended stays. But from an ICU perspective, really we're the only ICU that has those really tremendously extended stays. And so it requires such collaboration from both sides to come together for the care of these patients. And the beauty of it, and I kind of going back to what I said about why I chose nursing over being a physician, is that the physicians, they look at things from the medical perspective. And the way I describe it to people is oftentimes they have to come in and deliver the bad news and they have to walk back out the door. And because they have another patient they have to go take care of. And that's not something that I felt like I could do. I really wanted to be there with the families. I wanted to get in the trenches with the families, to be there to support them and to celebrate them,
Yeah.
on those good days, and then be with there to cry with them on those bad days. To be able to care for a patient for 12 hours at a time, you become a part of their lives and they allow you to become a part of their lives. And that's something that's really special. Whereas the physicians, I know many of them wish they could be at the bedside for 12 hours. I think they're a little
Right.
envious of nurses sometimes that we get to do that. But that's really why nursing was the path for me.
So I know that you don't just become a NICU nurse, like there's a lot of training that's involved in that. I'm curious, Lisa, what training was like and what you did when you were learning at the bedside, and then how that's changed. We won't say how many years, but how that's changed since you, because for us, it's just 5 years out, but what that looks like now versus whenever you were there. So give us an idea of what you went through and then how that's changed what you've seen kind of come
Yeah.
forth in all that time.
I will say, to become a NICU nurse, it's very competitive. Lots of people want to become NICU nurses, and so I'll kind of start at the beginning when you think about how do you get to be a NICU nurse. And I, even back in high school, I actually volunteered in the NICU in high school. Knowing that that's where I wanted to be, I started setting myself up and volunteering in the NICU as a high schooler, which was unheard of. They didn't have high school volunteers,
Right.
and I had to put myself out there and go meet with somebody and get to do that. And so, really, just getting that experience is really important. And then in nursing school, really advocating to have as much experience as you can in the NICU to be able to, like you mentioned before, get yourself in front of the right people to be able to get a position. But, onboarding as a new NICU nurse, it's difficult because nursing school prepares you to be a generalist nurse. You learn a
Right.
little bit about a lot of things. And not a lot of that is NICU. I tell students that if they want to do NICU, about 30% of what they learn in nursing school, 70% will teach you when you get on the job, because there's just so much different when you're talking about a tiny person that compared to an adult or even a pediatric patient. So typically for a new graduate NICU nurse, it's about a 20-week orientation. Now, back whenever I was there, I think my orientation was around 16-ish weeks as a new nurse. And at that 16-week mark, I was terrified to come off of
I'm
orientation.
sure.
I was
You're like, and
terrified.
now I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But, and hospitals have done orientation for new nurses has come so far. And so most hospitals are doing what's called a residency program, where they have a very well thought out systemic way that they are orienting new nurses. And they're providing them, cohorts, not only just at whatever department they're in, but also from other departments. So you'll have some classes that you would have with people from, PICU or acute care or HEMONC, to really get to know the other new nurses from around the hospital. They didn't have that whenever I started. And so really all of our orientation was just within the NICU. And so I think it's really fantastic that they do that. And they really celebrate now that the education and the 20 weeks. That's a big feat. You go through nursing school, you pass your boards, you come to a hospital, and then you make it through 20 weeks of orientation. And so we have big celebrations with graduations, and they can invite their family and loved ones. We have, one of them speak, and we have them do evidence-based practice projects. And we bring balloons and all kinds of things for our new graduate nurses, but it's quite a celebration, and it should be. Neonatology has changed so much even since I started as a NICU nurse, and just the amount of extra things they have to learn now that I didn't with technology. It's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Well, I do remember there was one point after we had been discharged from the NICU, we were back on the general floor. And I guess we really honestly, we should have either been in the PD ICU or over on the intermediate care floor, but they just didn't have beds. So I remember our son had all sorts of tubes, and in come all the nursing students because they were like, he's such a great testing case, and you guys have been around for a while. And so I'm in there like teaching nurses, this is how you do an NG tube. And I remember one of the nurses on call, she's like, hey, do you want a job? I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't need a job. But I do remember this, they were so scared. And I was like, oh, don't be scared of NICU moms. Like we've been around and we were just as scared as you when we started this. So I think that this, I think when you're talking about that 70-30, I mean, I could definitely see how some of them, because they were really gifted and obviously loved nursing. And I'm like, you're going to figure it out, but at first they were like, how do we do this? So I do, I can at least relate on the mom side of seeing them come through. So you mentioned a little bit about that 20-week orientation.
Mhm.
I'm curious, Lisa, if part of that, or maybe it happens after, like let's say a NICU nurse comes in to see a patient and they either, for whatever reason, they're struggling. Maybe it's because it's a case that's difficult for them.
Mm.
Maybe there's been some trauma in their own life and it's a trigger for them, or maybe there's like a personality conflict with the family. How do you counsel a nurse how to serve that family well while also recognizing that there might be a little bit of a conflict there?
That's an excellent question. And it happens, unfortunately, you know.
Right.
And I think part of it is how we equip them, right? Like that is on us as a leadership team to equip them with the skills that they need. Placing somebody, even a straight A student that did wonderful in nursing school, popping them into a NICU, surrounded by an unfamiliar environment, and you are seeing families at their worst.
Right.
And that's what I always tell, our new nurses, is that you are seeing these families at their worst. This is their hopes and dreams laying there in that crib, and that they never wanted to be here. Nobody ever wants to visit us in the NICU. And so when you take that perspective and give families grace, and to be able to take a step back and really equipping them with de-escalation tools. And that's something that we are very passionate about teaching our all of our staff, not just our new nurses, is really how to de-escalate a family, how to see things from their perspective, how to meet them in the middle. Sometimes it's the loss of control.
Yeah.
Ultimately, 9 times out of 10, whenever I'm called to come talk to a family, it is because the family is grieving the loss of a perfect child, and they are also grieving the loss of control over what's happening to their child. And so even if it's something as simple as allowing the parent to choose the outfit, or choose take the temperature for the baby, or decide that they want the feedings to be at 8 versus 9 o'clock. It's something very simple like that, oftentimes is all they're asking for. And so really just trying to teach them to be able to take a step back and look at things from a different perspective. And there's different personalities in the world. And everywhere you go, you're not going to get along with everybody. And there are certain times that, for whatever reason, families and nurses just don't gel. And that's okay. That is okay. And that, we have a very big staff. We always do our very best to try to make it work. And I will say 99.99% of the time, we can come to a resolution that's amenable to all and everybody's able to move on.
Well, I know that, and it's not an indictment on one of the nurses that we had. There was a little bit of a personality conflict, and I remember calling the charge nurse and I said, "Listen, she's a really good nurse, and we like to think that we're a decent family. We're just not seeing eye to eye on that." And I was grateful that they were like, "All right, we'll switch it up," and they did. And we're still friends with that nurse, but I think sometimes you're right. I think that reminder that, man, if they had seen me on my best day, they might have really loved me. But I'm sure in the chart it said like mom is very mama bear. So I do think that it's a reminder for parents, but
Yeah,
also for NICU professionals. Like it's a high emotion situation that you're walking into really every time,
absolutely.
and you don't know if maybe a specialist just walked in the room and delivered really crummy news, and maybe you just hadn't seen the chart yet to see what that news was, and you just don't know what's going through that. So I think that it kind of reminds me too, Lisa, of I remember on the hard days, there were some little things that our nurses did to like build rapport with us, or to make us feel like, hey, we are invested in the positive outcome of your baby. What are some things that y'all do, whether it's an orientation or on the job, to encourage nurses to say, like, hey, the rubrics of like how to start an IV. We know how to do all this, but like, how do you teach the intangibles that I think make NICU nurses so beloved?
Some of those things you can't teach. And I think you learn by example. And I will say, I had some incredible, incredible NICU nurses that I worked with that had been there a lot longer than I had whenever I was a new nurse. And to watch them, it's about the little things. It's about making that little handprint art on Mother's Day. It's about, you giving a lock of hair to the family. It's about
Yeah.
putting a cute blanket on the bed and dressing them up before the family comes in, or offering to take a picture of them with their child, getting the music therapist to come in and sing lullabies to the baby, to offer to record the mom singing lullabies to the baby. It's the softer touch. And those things are hard to teach. It's you really just have to lead by example with those. Of course, in orientation, we talk about all of the things that we do around family centered care and why that's important. And we teach the book knowledge of that and why that's important, but really it's role modeling from the other staff.
How do you do it, Lisa, so that, because I know there's a there's an emotional toll, right? Like I know when you, as opposed, and I'm not saying there's not an emotional toll to other nursing areas in the hospital, but in the NICU, like you said, that relationship is a longer sustaining
Mm.
relationship. How do you counsel your nurses to be invested in the families, but not carry all that home, like, to the point that they are either burned out as a nurse or they find it difficult to come back into the NICU because it's so heavy and it's so hard, even though there may be some days that, are great joys. Like, how do you help them do those little things, but also not burn out along the way?
Yeah. I think that as a leadership team, this goes for any organization, you have to rally around your nurses and you have to provide them with tools. We have wonderful employee assistance programs at our hospital to where if it does get too hard, there is help and it's free and it's at the hospital and we're there. We have a wonderful chaplain team that really rallies around the staff whenever we have a loss or anytime we have something happening in the unit. We have a great debrief process, just emotional debriefs, not even necessarily that anything happened from a medical perspective. It's really just that emotional debrief because sometimes things are very unexpected. And even sometimes when they are expected, you never want it to happen on your watch.
Yeah.
And and so really just providing that outlet for staff to know that it's a safe space and that it's okay to feel that way. I always tell people that, being a NICU nurse, a lot of people think, oh, you just get to play with babies all day. And that's a good day. That's a really good day, is what I tell people. And that, my good days are really, really good and my bad days are really, really bad. But the good days outweigh the bad. And You have to be able to separate yourself. And that's harder for some than it is for others. And, I can't tell you how many countless shifts I cried the whole way home and hugged my babies very, very tight when I got home and counted my blessings for what I had. It's inevitable. This is somebody's child. And when things happen, it's not right. It's not the proper order of life when we lose babies. And it shouldn't happen that way. And so I think I would be concerned if people didn't take that on and feel that. But you have to be able to process it in a healthy way. And so I think that's really on us as leadership teams and on organizations to provide that support that our staff need.
So, what's changed? Like, I know we talked a little bit about mental health. I'm curious, how has that shifted since you first started as a bedside nurse today? I mean, I certainly know the mental health resources for families has
Oh,
changed
yeah.
drastically. I'm curious what's happened in the nursing, particularly in NICU nursing.
When I started in NICU nursing, there really was no resources.
Right.
And it was just part of the job. And you just need to put your big girl pants on and move on. And that was just kind of what was ingrained in us. I think the really nice thing, people like to knock the next generations coming up. But I will say that I think it's fantastic. They are very in touch with their feelings, and they need something very different than my generation or older of nurses have needed to be able to process these issues. We stuffed them down. We didn't talk
Yeah.
about them. And and so I think it's actually really healthy. And so it has pushed us as leaders to be able to provide them that outlet for listening, and to be able to provide those debriefs. Debriefs were not necessarily a thing when I started in nursing. And now, immediately after we have an unexpected event or a death, or we all get together, the doctors, the nurses, the respiratory therapists, the chaplain, the child life specialist, and really just talk about our emotions. And one thing that we have started doing, it's called a sacred pause, whenever we lose a patient. And the unit is so busy and there is so much going on, and just taking a moment to just be quiet and still and remember that life, and rather than just moving on to the next patient or the next tasks or the next things to do, is really just pausing and acknowledging what just happened.
Yeah, I would suspect that. I mean, you have a unit full of babies that need to be cared for, but I'm grateful that, and I do remember there was one day that we lost a baby in the NICU when I was there, and I remember hearing the mom, and I remember my nurses walking in, and I just remember thinking, one, I was so grateful that that touched them, because I think sometimes you think, not that we ever felt like a number in the NICU, but sometimes you worry, like, have we become just another patient? And it
Mhm.
was on that day that I was like, nope, they really do see us. And I think that that's such a unique thing to the neonatal intensive care unit. So, Lisa, when they're going through training, speaking of this loss of life, I know particularly neonatal palliative care. I mean, certainly pediatric palliative care and obviously adult palliative care has been around for a long time. How are NICUs changing when it comes to palliative care for neonates? I mean, I remember some of the things that existed in the NICU that you and I were both in, but I'm
Mhm.
curious what that looks like now.
Oh my goodness, it has come so far. And I know that I personally am so blessed to work where I work, and we have a very large palliative care department. The hospital really has placed a lot into that department and the importance of it. And it is a newer thing. You're absolutely right. We had bereavement resources. We
Right.
didn't have palliative care resources, and those two things are very different. People think that palliative care is end of life, and that couldn't be further from the truth. We have babies that are going to go home with a very complex, life limiting, maybe diagnosis, but they may live, to be an adult. But we need to be able to manage them. They need to live the best life that they can live. They need to live without pain, if possible, or as little pain as they can. and to really have those resources around them. And so I think there's been such a tremendous shift in thinking that calling for a palliative care consult is not a bad thing, that it's actually a great thing. And I will say, Kathryn, that's even been the last 5 or 6 years that we have come to that point that, the nurses are advocating, hey, I think a palliative care consult would really be great on this patient. And just the resources that they are able to provide for the families. I was privileged recently to be a part of a survey for our palliative care department, and Joint Commission was coming to survey, and I left that room just so proud of all we're doing. I see the microcosm of the NICU, but what we're doing from a palliative care perspective across the hospital is just truly remarkable. And so, if your hospital doesn't have a palliative care, department, you could even do small things within a smaller NICU. You don't have to have a department to be able to provide the support for the families. Of course, it's great to have that if you do, but there's so much that you can do. And really, it's just around, coming together as a multidisciplinary team to have, all the people that are involved in the care of the baby coming together to realize, what are the goals for this child? What are the parents' goals for the child? I think sometimes that gets lost. We work so hard to save lives, and sometimes we don't pause to ask mom and dad, what are your goals for your baby? And what does quality of life mean to you? And so I think that that's the great thing that palliative care has done for us, is really for just us to take that moment, to be able to acknowledge that and be in that space with the families, and then try to help them reach whatever goals those are.
This is my plug to go back a couple of months. If you've been listening to NICU Heroes, I did a beautiful interview with a doctor who's sort of pioneering the neonatal palliative care effort, and it's really beautiful. In fact, I'm starting to wonder if you were listening in on our conversation, because many
No.
of the things that you said would no, but that's such a good that means that the talking points are the same, that people are starting to be on the same page. So I love that. I
Yeah.
love that the neonatal intensive care unit doesn't just nurse one kind of baby or one kind of family, but that the outcomes are different for every family, and
Mhm.
sort of honoring where people are. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Hand to Hold is here to support your NICU in two ways. One, you can refer your NICU parents to us for support. Or two, you can bring dedicated Hand to Hold support to your NICU, either in person or virtually. Our support consists of one-to-one group and educational resources, including our family-focused podcast, NICU Babies Parent Support. For more information, visit handtohold.org and click on NICU Professionals. I'm curious, Lisa, and I know we've talked about this before, but I love the way that you say it. Like, how do you keep your passion? I mean, certainly I know you've changed roles, and
Mhm.
those come with their own bits of challenges, but also, with their exciting moments too. How have all those years, how have you kept your passion for nursing alive when many nurses are like, it's too hard, I feel burned out, I can't do this anymore? What is it that you do keeps you so connected to the NICU and so passionate about helping other nurses feel the same way?
Yeah, I think I have the best job in the whole world. I really, really do, and not many people can say that. And I think it's all about how you get plugged in. I think truthfully, the people that get burned out are oftentimes the ones that clock in and do their 12 hours, and then they may go home, and they're not really get invested in how are we going to improve outcomes. And I think that's what keeps me going, is that, and truthfully, that's how I got into leadership, is because, I always wanted to do the best that I could for my patients in the 12 hours that I had them. I'd have one or two patients for 12 hours, and I always wanted to just do the best that I could for those patients. And I realized that when I moved into leadership, that I could actually impact care for many more babies and many more families. And I think that as a nurse, I love our profession. I'm so proud of our profession. I don't like it when people say just a nurse, because we are so much more than that. And
Yeah.
and so truthfully, I think just getting involved is really important. Never stop learning. Nursing, there is always something new to learn. I went on to get my master's and my doctorate in nursing. I'm not planning on going back to school anymore.
I was going to say, how many more degrees are left, Lisa?
No, no more. But I think that truthfully, but I never stop learning. Every single day I seek to learn something more. Every single day I seek to have a better outcome than we had the day before for our babies, because we can always do better. And just whenever we reach that next step, let's take it to the next step beyond that. And I think that's truthfully what keeps me going. And like you mentioned before, surrounding myself by such incredible leaders, by such incredible physicians that just continue to inspire me daily. There's not many days that I don't come in with a smile on my face, but if I don't come in with a smile on my face, within 10 minutes, I'm interacting with somebody that just has a fire and a passion for whatever their tasks are for that day. And I feed off of that because we are all in it for those babies. And I'm passionate, not just about within the walls of my hospital. And I think sometimes we can get very siloed off, but also understanding
Yeah.
neonatology across your city, across your state, across the country, getting plugged in. I have the privilege of being involved on a national level for National Association of Neonatal Nurses and advocating for our patients. And I think doing things like that really keeps your eye on the mission and really why we're here. And no matter what hospital system you serve, we're all in it for moms and babies.
Yeah. Well, I know that things have changed a lot, even in since the time in the last 14 years that we were there. I mean, family-centered care was just kind of on the cusp. Like, we were starting to hear about bits and pieces of, oh, this NICU, or oh, this hospital, or oh, this children's hospital is starting to do family-centered care. I remember when I would talk to fellow moms around the country who had NICU babies, they were like, what is family-centered care? And now where people are like, how can you not know about family-centered care? So what's been the biggest, I guess, shift for you as a nurse and working with nurses, Lisa, that you've noticed some of, I guess, some of the challenges, but maybe some of the benefits in family-centered care and how that's really played out in the NICU?
I think when the terminology came out, there was a little bit of a negative connotation to it.
Yeah,
I'm not going to lie. It was because it had been a very paternalistic situation in the medical field, right? The doctors and the nurses,
right.
they tell you what to do and the families fall in line, and that's just the way that it's going to be. And so family-centered care, there were a lot of tenured nurses, I won't say older, tenured nurses
That's
at
so
that
nice. I
time
love that.
that they didn't want that. They liked the model they had. They felt like they were in control of the baby and they knew what that was best for the baby better than anybody else. And but my goodness, how short-sighted we were, and so where we are now with families is it, like I said, it's a partnership. Just like I said before, it is a partnership and everybody's input is just as important at the table. Those families being there, these babies have better outcomes when the families are there with the babies. When you see that heart rate, become nice and steady when mom is doing kangaroo care, when you invite the parents to be a part of rounds, what incredible insight. They may not have gone to nursing school, they may not have gone
Right.
to medical school, but oftentimes they know their baby better than any of us. And so it's so refreshing the era that we're in now, where we want families there all the time, where we are, building NICUs where families can stay 24/7. What a dream to be able to do that, and I know whenever I took care of your little guy, we had individual rooms, which was a novel concept at that
Right.
time. But there were no bathrooms for you. So, and there was no bed. And so, now we're
Yes.
building units with bathrooms and beds for families to
How
come
novel to
and
have a bathroom
stay.
in a place where you spend all this time, right?
Absolutely. And a bed for you to lay your head
Yes.
on.
Right.
It's really, really incredible. And it contributes to outcomes in such a big way. I love being in family care conferences now whenever we all come to the table. And most of the time we let the families talk first. We say, what are your
Yes.
goals, for this meeting? What is it that we can help you with? What is it, your baby needs from us? How can we do better? How can, and just to give the families the acknowledgement for what they understand and know is really incredible. And then, it's not just about the visitation and the kangaroo care, which is all important, and of course the family's opinions at the table, but it's involving them in every aspect of the care. It's encouraging them to do everything that they can at the bedside for that baby, to be able to be involved in their therapy, to be able to be involved with the child life specialist comes and those types of things. And that's really incredible. I've had the privilege to be at some conferences where there's some great new innovations that are coming down the pipeline to really be able to help families bond with their babies even whenever they're not able to be there. And it's really exciting. And I will say even some of the big companies that manufacture like isolettes and some of those types of things, they are even on this movement about how can we do better family-centered care from the perspective of the isolette, and how can we be more amenable to a mom in a wheelchair coming up to be able to
Mm.
touch her baby and be with her baby. How do we need to design it better? And I've been a part of some of those work groups, and so everybody is on board now, which is really just fantastic. We're as nurses, we're not having to MacGyver things to make it amenable to family-centered care. The companies are paying attention.
Well, I have a question about that. Before I do, though, I do want to mention this is that we were in a unique position that we started out in one NICU, which was very traditional. And then 9 days later, we found ourselves in family centered care. So we had learned, what we thought was one way. And then we get to family centered care. And I remember the first time that they rounded, the neonatologist looked at me first and said, "Kathryn, tell me about your baby. How's he doing? What are you concerned about?" And I remember thinking, I mean, shouldn't is the dietitian supposed so I was so shocked, but also I felt like I was actually not an observer, but a part of the team. And like when I would say things like, "Why are you doing that?" That I think at least from a parent perspective, that was a beautiful part of family centered care is I started to understand the why. And so many of the questions that I had were already answered because people were sharing like the thought process. So I think that was a really beautiful sort of symbiotic relationship and that we were able to do that. And it was such a shift. Like we had to shift, kind of halfway through. But okay, so I loved what you said about this accessibility part, Lisa, because I know that there's two parts to that is that there are some families that walk in with an incredible amount of education and privilege, and so they know what they need to ask, they know what they need to do, and there are some families that have no support network, socioeconomic status may be very different, and they come with many more challenges. So how do you, as a NICU, help your nurses serve those families in the same way, in the sense that they're getting the same kind of care, but that they're getting it unique to them?
Absolutely. And I think that comes with that orientation. And it's one of those things that you learn from, tenured nurses, because every family they come from very different walks of life. At where I work, we get patients from around the world. So we have different cultural considerations for families. And you have to meet families where they are, and talking at families. It's very easy to walk in the room and go down your laundry list of this is what I'm doing for your baby today, and X, Y, and Z, and this is what we're going to do. Any questions? No, no, no,
Because you
no.
don't even know what to ask, right?
They don't even know what to ask, right?
Right.
And so really watching your families as you're talking to them, assessing for understanding, pausing and asking specific questions. Kathryn, tell me what you understand about your son's condition. Really opening up with that question helps lead you where you need to go. For it may be somebody that has no education, or it may be somebody that is a physician, right? And so being able
Right.
to meet them where they are is really important, and asking those questions before you just start talking is very, very important to understand. And also encouraging families to write down their questions. Oftentimes, the families, they think of questions not during rounds time, and rounds is stressful. There's a lot of eyes on you,
Right.
and so really encouraging families to write down their questions prior to rounds, and then being there as the bedside nurse to help support the families. Remind them, remember you had a question about this, and did you want to ask about that? And really just coming alongside families in a supportive manner like that, I think is very, very important aspect. So
I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think sometimes we fear, oh, if I ask that question, one, they're going to think I'm stupid, or that's such a silly question, like I should know that, or that's not even, I shouldn't even write that down. So I think the encouragement for the nurse to be like their cheerleader, to be like, remember we talked about this, like, and also the belief, like, hey, they believe that this is a question that I should ask. They believe that this is important. So having sort of the credentialed person standing next to you be able to pour into you and say, "Hey, you should ask that question." That's one that's worthwhile, even if they may know the answer or maybe you know the answer, but I think it's a good encouragement to everyone to be like, "You should ask. It's okay." They're not
absolutely.
gonna think that's a silly question.
Well, and I think telling families too, like there are no silly questions. And,
Yeah,
whenever I was at the bedside, I used to tell families, I'm going to tell you this and I'm going to talk you through this. You may forget everything tomorrow, and that's
right.
okay. You can ask me all these questions again. I will go through all of this again with you tomorrow, because like I mentioned, they're at the worst of their life right there.
Right.
They are not going to absorb and remember many things that you're telling them. And so having patience, having grace, repeating as many times as it takes for families to understand, I think is so important.
Yeah, it's nice to have a cheerleader in the room. We all need one, and it's almost
Absolutely.
always your NICU nurse. So I know that you've done a lot of research on this golden hour, which is that first hour after birth. I want you to share with people about that golden hour and what makes it so golden, like what your research and some of your clinical experiences told you about what that hour can mean for the outcome of that baby.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is just really incredible, because if you would have even talked about this, when I started in NICU nursing, nobody would have believed you that it could happen. But, the first hour of life, the golden hour concept really came from term babies, and that it's so important for babies to be with their moms for that first hour of life, for them to have that bonding experience, to put the babies to breast within the first hour of life. But from a NICU perspective, it's very different. We wish that we could have our babies with the moms, but unfortunately, that's not the reality most of the times. And we do have to take them to the NICU. But what's so important is there are so many things that have to happen to this tiny little person that was nice and warm inside of their mom. And now here they are in the NICU. And although we do the very best to try to not move them around too much, and do our best to not have it be too loud or too cold or all the things, it's very, very stressful on their body. They're not supposed to be there yet. And so, for us to be able to do everything that we need for that baby and to be able to get that isolette closed. So, particularly, we're talking about like extremely low birth weight babies. So, ELBW babies that are very, very tiny, and very sensitive to the surroundings. And so, the goal is to have everything done for them, whether that be if you have to place a line, if you have to get your x-ray done, all those things. Of course, you have to intubate maybe in the delivery room and get them on the ventilator and get them all settled into the NICU. But the goal is to have the isolate closed and be able to allow the baby to rest by 1 hour. And that hour goes very fast, with all
Yeah.
the things that have to happen. But it really, in order to accomplish it, it takes a multidisciplinary effort to be able to do it. And so, I would encourage any nurses that, wanted to start this at their facility and wanted to make this a goal. You have to have meetings with radiology. You have to make sure that they understand the importance. To them, it's another x-ray order. It's another
Mm,
stat x-ray order. But it's critical for that baby and for them to
right.
understand, and to see the light bulbs go on when you go meet with these other areas that don't routinely, interact with your unit, and just how critical that is for these babies and really for their long-term neurodevelopmental outcomes. Whenever you, actually honor that golden hour, there are less infections. Their discharge time is sooner. There are less IVH rates in these babies. And so the evidence supports it. It is there. It's really just about coordination with all the areas and also making sure, sometimes you have deliveries that are very unexpected and you don't have time to have all the supplies and everything ready to go. And that's understandable. But if you know you're expecting an ELBW baby, to have everything ready to go for line placement, for intubation, et cetera, to where you can really better facilitate that process within the hour is really great. And if it is something that your unit wants to start, start collecting data, just start somewhere, see how you are right now. What is your time? Go to one of those deliveries, time it and see how you are right now and where you're starting from. And then slowly start understanding how you can chip away at that and where the areas of opportunity are for better collaboration and coordination.
Sounds like a good what's your baseline? And
Yes,
then going up from there. Oh man, I'm showing my NICU colors there.
that's right.
I'm curious, Lisa, tell us a little bit about what your hardest day in the NICU was like
Mm.
and how you navigated through it. I think that might be helpful for some nurses to hear.
Yeah. Oh, I have all the feelings right now. Because I will never forget, losing a baby was always very hard. It never got easier, and I can still remember all the sweet babies that I lost, and some of the parents I still keep in touch with, and there was one particular case where it was the mom's birthday, and it was also Mother's Day, and they had prayed for this baby for a very, very long time, and they lost their baby on that day. And I will absolutely never, I'm going to cry. I will never forget that because it was wrong on so many levels. They had wonderful family support. They had prayed for this baby for a very long time, and it wasn't fair. And so that was one of the hardest ones that I really ever had to deal with. And had to, I'm a religious person. I did a lot of praying after that. I had to walk down the hallway and pull myself together because, you can show empathy, but you can't be in a puddle in the floor with the families.
Right.
And so I think, for nurses, it's okay to have to walk away and pull yourself together and be able to come back. And, we don't ever know why things like that happen. And but what you can do as a NICU nurse, what's in your sphere of control is to be able to make those minutes and seconds count, to be able to provide them as many memories as you can in that time, to respect their space and to allow them time to be with the baby, however long that they need. So it was a very, very hard day. And, but one thing that really spurred me to become a lot more passionate about bereavement in the NICU. And so every loss, I tried to take something and make it better for the next baby. And and so I oftentimes would go buy blankets and clothes and those types of things to have, because oftentimes these babies didn't have any of those things. But I wanted the families to have an opportunity to dress them, to have a pretty blanket to put around them, to help bathe that baby with some beautiful smelling soaps. And it was the little things. And I know hospitals have come so far. We are so
Yeah.
lucky that we have a butterfly room now that families can go to, and it feels like they're being transported out of the hospital and into a nursery at their house. And they have books to read to the baby. They have a beautiful bassinet to put the baby in. And so, making those moments count, I think, are where we can take something that is absolutely horrible and then try to make it better for the next.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that wasn't easy. I appreciate you walking through. I didn't warn you that I was going to make you cry, so I apologize. But I think that that's going to help a nurse to inevitably will encounter something difficult and wonder, how can I be of service to this family, but
Yeah.
also be a good nurse. So I'm going to switch gears and ask you to tell us about your best day. What was your very best day in the NICU, and why was it your best day?
That's really hard to pin down. I will say, I think there's been multiple good days. Anytime that I had had a primary for many, many months and they got to go home, those days stand out to me. Those are a really, really good day.
Yeah.
And I think that, from a personal level, finishing my doctorate is something that I am so very proud of, and not for something to hang on my wall, but it's what that means and what I can do with that for my patients and for the staff, and how I can better care for them, day in and day out. And there's so many small wins along the way, and so many passion projects that I've had that I never thought I was going to see through, and finally gaining traction on those, and knowing that we're going to be able to provide families the support that they need in different ways. I think it's always a huge win. Anytime that we are be able to do something for our families, is always a big win.
It's a pretty good day. I'd say those are some good days. I love
Yeah.
that. So I'm going to ask you to dream a little bit. This is my last question for you.
Yeah.
What, Lisa, if you had to think about maybe the next decade in the NICU and how you serve your patients and how you help your nurses, like, what's your hope for what NICU nursing may look like a decade from now?
I love that question because things are really shifting and really changing. One passion project that I've been able to be a part of is the creation of a virtual nursing program for our NICU. And people say, virtual nursing in the NICU, don't you have to have a nurse there in the unit with the baby? Well, absolutely. The nurses are still in the
Yes,
unit.
still important.
It's still very important, but it's really, like I talked about, meeting families where they are. And so this is where nursing and neonatology is going, is using technology to better integrate, to provide better family-centered care, using technology to be able to predict when babies are getting sick quicker, to be able to intervene sooner, to be able to use evidence-based practice to really guide everything that we do. You know, there's so many conditions that we would have to just deal with them after the baby was born. Now we can do fetal surgery to take care of a lot of those things. And
Crazy.
it's just incredible, right? But to go back to the virtual nursing example, what we are doing is we are having virtual visits with families to acquaint them to the NICU. You think about all the millions of questions that you have. Where is the cafeteria? Where do I park? All of those questions that families have that they don't want to bother the bedside nurse for. They see that the bedside nurse is busy. And so, really having that virtual nurse. And so, it's one of our nurses that is there that they'll see on the unit maybe the next day. And it's one of our nurses that reaches out to them and spends on average about 25 minutes with them, just educating them about NICU life, being that touch point, getting them connected with lactation, getting them connected with social work if that's what they need, getting them connected to resources in general. And then also doing education. Many families, they have to go back to work and
Right.
they can't be up at the unit. And babies that have very complex needs that need a lot of education before discharge, well, some of it needs to be done in person, and that's understandable. But there's so much that could be done virtually. And wouldn't it be great if the parent could put their other child to bed at night and then hop on and get educated on how best they can take care of their NICU baby that's coming home soon? And so I really, my goal would be across the nation that becomes the standard for families, to be able to provide that it would be the standard to have cameras in every unit for families to be able to log in to see their babies whenever they're at home. I think back to my own experience as a NICU mom, what I wouldn't have given to be able to log in whenever I woke up to pump at night to be able to see my
Yes.
baby. And that should be a standard of care across the nation. And so I think just how we can better use technology, it's really going to be incredible in the next 10 years on how we can better care for our babies.
I know when I first was talking to some NICU moms, this is just a few years ago, and they were sharing with me, oh, when I logged on and saw the camera and I was able to watch my baby and I was like, wait, what? And I teared up immediately because I thought of all the nights that I called the nurses, at 3 a.m. And I was like, can you put Luke, what does he look like? What's he up to? But to have been able to see him would have
Yeah,
brought an incredible amount of peace in a really stressful situation. I'm with you. I think I get excited every time I do one of these interviews and ask people to dream a little bit about what they see in their particular profession and like what's coming. And it makes me so excited, not just for the survivability of babies, but that they are going to thrive
oh, absolutely.
and grow up to have amazing lives. And while that may look different for every baby, this ability to give them the best chance at having the best quality of life is really exciting for me. And I'm just the mom, not a NICU nurse. So I do love it.
Not just the
Lisa,
mom. No, not just the nurse, not just the
right.
mom.
Okay.
Both very
Fair.
important.
Fair. Okay, that's fair. Hey, thank you, Lisa, for
Thank
such great, I should
you.
call you Dr. Davenport. Thank you so
No.
much for your great wisdom and encouragement to nurses to take good care of themselves so that they can take good care of their babies, as well as giving us a lot of hope as to what's to come.
Oh, thank you. It's such an honor. And the hour goes by so fast because I love talking about what I do. And new nurses are my passion. I love to pour into them. And so I believe in our profession. So thanks so much.
Thanks, y'all, so much for listening. That was a fantastic conversation. I hope that you'll do me a favor. If you love today's episode, please share it with a friend. You can also review over on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. You can also give us a listen and a watch over on YouTube. It's how we reach more NICU professionals. Today's podcast episode is sponsored by Reckitt Mead Johnson, whose mission is to nourish the world's children for the best start in life. For more than a century, they have led the way in developing safe, high-quality, innovative nutrition products and continue to push the boundaries of nutritional knowledge with consistent, strong investments in scientific exploration.